All right, welcome everybody to our 2020 draft budget presentation. Thank you for coming, and thank you to those who are probably watching at home to get an update on where we're to with our 2020 budget. If all goes okay, then we'll be adopting it on Thursday. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Chair of Finance, Councillor Tony Pollard, and he will guide you through where we're to right now and where we're going to be. All right.
Thank you, Your Worship, and welcome everybody. If you want copies of the presentation, it's over there on the table, so feel free to. I know the last time it was harder to see on the screen behind me, so hopefully it'll be a little larger this time, but you certainly have a play-by-play. And there's no skipping to the back page to find out what the result is and walk out earlier or anything, so just have to bear with it. The first thing I will say is a big thank you to Don and Jacqueline over the past number of days who worked very hard at putting the final figures together for us, and many iterations of the spreadsheets and questions right up to the very last minute. And Don was off sick all last week, so I certainly know how it's hard to work from being home and stuffed up and choked up and everything else, and Jacqueline, who's new to it, certainly picked up immediately and is a great asset to the town already. I can feel that just in the short time that she's been here, so kudos. And special thanks to all the other staff too who presented and put their budgets together for a presentation to us in prior consultations. And thanks to my fellow councillors, Deputy Mayor and Mayor as well, for their input and patience as we walked down through this. And of course we had a few battles. As you know, we talked last year somewhat about the impact of the community centre, and certainly that has a great impact on what we're doing, but it also has a positive impact on what it offers the community and in future growth and things of that nature as well, and just the whole sense of spirit and whatever. I will tell you that when we started the budget consultations, and we went through a process of speaking internally and having, I won't say pie in the sky ideas, but certainly, what people thought would be the best foot forward for moving forward to 2020. And we were $2 million shy on the budget line. So that's where we started from to bring us where we are today. So the intent is actually to run down through the slide presentation, and I'll try to provide you as much information as possible. When we get to the pie charts at the back, I may digress to a form of paper that you don't have at the present time, although the figures should still be the same, just to highlight some of the changes from this year's budget versus last year's budget and where we end up. So having said that, I will certainly start, and I beg your patience. So I guess on the first slide, it certainly gives just an overview of where we started, and I kind of alluded to that, where we just review the current expenditures, develop operational budget plans, and we have some public engagement. We did that through online media, and we had some feedback here at one point in time as well, and of course all your feedback that you provide us when you show up to the council meetings on a regular basis. We presented a internal draft budget which we all reviewed and tore apart and came back, and finally we're here now to present a draft budget to our residents so that they can have some idea which way the town is going to, or we think the town will go over the next year. So obviously we used a bunch of communication media, which is on this slide here, and I won't go into those. All hands who communicate with the town know of the multimedia devices we have, and of course the most recent one being the live stream, which I think has been a great addition. By the way, if I'm speaking too quickly, I did look at the last presentation. I have a tendency to speak rather quickly and can mumble a few times, so if I happen to do that, just someone raise their hand and slow me down or something along those lines. But I did promise that I'd be 20 minutes, so I got to stick to that. I always keep my promise. So we did a resident survey, and we got some results, and they're listed on, you'll see on this slide here. 74% resident priority number one was road infrastructure, and in our budget this year we have some $1.5 million to spend in that area. Resident priority number two was identified at 50% of respondents, I guess, for water and wastewater infrastructure, and we're at $525,000-ish in the budget. Now, I will say that that figure could be kind of misleading because it's really operational versus capital. Capital will be much more when we talk about water and wastewater initiatives. Priority number 3 was community facilities and parks, and that is in the area of $1.1 million. Traffic calming and safety, once again, budgeted at $75,000, which may seem less than last year. Once again, I have to say that anything we do from a capital perspective is certainly not reflected in that $74,000 figure. Is really the traffic calming side of things and some smaller safety initiatives. Any larger ones will be covered off by some larger capital expenditures. And resident priority number 5 was given at recreation, and that comes in at $818,366, and that is outside of the operations of the community center. On the next page, we start talking about some of the major resident priorities as identified on the first slide we just looked at, or the slide we just looked at with the 5 categories. So the road projects, we're going to institute a ditching program this year, and that's going to cost us some $31,000. Fire department identified some safety concerns here on the main road with them backing into the fire station and just the flow of traffic around the drugstore and things of that nature. So we're certainly going to put some money to try to alleviate that safety issue and make it much more easy for the fire department to leave and enter the premises. And that is there at $146,000. That will not be $146,000. That will be financed. We had to change that to a finance item or get the budget to where it is at the present time. Sidewalk installation on Torbay Road. I know we had it in the budget last year and there were some controversial discussions over that, but we decided to put it back again this year because I think regardless of whether or not we all agreed as to how, we certainly all agree that there is a need for pedestrian safety and it would be great to see sidewalks. So we put the $1 million capital cost back in this year, certainly with the hope that that money will be leveraged again by some funding either through provincial initiatives or through federal initiatives. If not, we're just going to have to make a decision to go it alone and see where that brings us at the end of the day. On the water and wastewater infrastructure, we're looking to purchase some leak detection gear in the amount of $25,000. The water supply study in the amount of $40,758. The wastewater sampling program will be $30,000, and that's to meet the federal wastewater effluent regulations. And zone meter installation, which is an ongoing project, which will have a $1.6 million capital cost. So that's kind of straddles both years, although obviously the financing for that will be included in the 2020 budget go forward. On the community park and facilities, we left money in there for trails at $100,000. We haven't yet identified what we will spend that way. We certainly didn't have the same conversations we had last year around trails, but once again, it's sort of like the sidewalks. We all agree that trails are certainly a necessary initiative and part and parcel of the core of any town our size, with the lovely coast we have here and the opportunities to hike and use trails, get in the outdoors. Softball field lights, we identified halfway through the year, I guess, and we had that all ready to go this year, although it looks like it'll be next year now before it actually gets done. And those aging lights on the softball fields were in the area of $500,000 to replace, so we put them in as a capital cost project for 2020. They do have some safety concerns around it if they don't get tended to within the next year or so anyway, so we hopefully will be able to change them and they'll last for another 20 years or more and everybody will be happy. Operations at Torbay Common, the splash pad, skate park, and inclusive playground will be in the area of $678,504. So if you look at that figure alone, so the operations alone of the community center are adding, 7/10 of a mil to what our normal operations would be if you look at it in terms of those dollars and how the mill rate impact would be. And the next sheet is really the Torbay Common operations. That figure I gave you, $678,000, is offset slightly by an estimated revenue source of some $76,000 to leave $602,000. Now that $76,000 is, a best guess at this time as well, based on what we see as some of the programs and offerings that we will do. That could be more. Hopefully it won't be any less than that, but we're optimistic that will certainly increase and will provide a greater benefit to offset the operational cost. The traffic calming and safety. Review of pedestrian safety. We spent a lot of money this year on the speed calming initiatives with all the speed bumps we put around. I think we spent some $240,000 this year on speed calming alone. So we left $60,000 in this year, realizing that this is a bigger picture budget in terms of, we know that we spent a lot of money this year on a lot of things that were either unknown, surprises to us, or things that happened that maybe shouldn't have happened, or operationally you couldn't have predicted. So we do realize that, and rather than really come out hard on this budget and say, yeah, we're going to make up for all that now, we sit down and said, no, let's just take a wait and see attitude and see where that brings us at the end of this year, and then we can move forward a little more intelligently with some information in hand from really some normal operations, and I'll put normal in quotes on that. The Northeast Avalon RNC patrol expansion, some $15,000 in there now for our portion of the whole Northeast Avalon initiative that the RNC is going to put in for the extra patrols that they spoke about last year, and they kind of changed the program up a bit to us participating in the purchase of cars. Sorry? 2 cars, yeah. 2 vehicles. And the sidewalk installation I spoke to under the capital project a little bit earlier. On the recreation side of things, we're looking at some expanded programming, 60-plus programming, some focus on sports, wellness, youth, and seniors in the amount of $382,000, and some support to community groups. Obviously, we support a number of community groups, and that's in the amount of $87,700. On the next page, I guess, is where the secret is, I guess, overall. It shows where the total assessed property values are. We're in the excess of $1 billion in terms of property assessments. That's a big number, and gives us a fairly acceptable tax base, I guess, at this point in time. So for this year, we decided that we would not raise the mill rate. We will be holding the mill rate steady at our 6.7 and our commercial at 10.5. And I know half of you already read to that page. And if you know what it wasn't on the last page, because I knew you'd go there first. And if you put it in the middle, you can't find it. So there it is. So right now, it looks like we're at a state of course on the tax side of things. The next slide gives it's essentially a breakdown of where our revenues are coming from. And if you look at the property tax side of things, we at $7.3 million. Government transfers will be $2.2 million, and that's really their share of capital projects, the municipal operating grants, and some gas tax monies. Revenue from other sources, $325,000. They deal with things like our interest, some rent we have for some folks who occupy parts of our building, compliance letters and fees on that side of things. Sales of goods and services relate to our programming revenues that we would receive from some recreation activities, and Flat Rock Fire, that we charge them for use of our fire department, shall we say. Summer day camp, any concerts we may have or anything along those lines for community events. Utility tax, always a guess too. We don't know. We always think that should be higher, and I guess one of these days we get the provincial government on side to actually dig into how we may better get a handle on what exactly the utilities are actually earning and try to get a higher percentage of that, because that really has not increased over the years. But it is $336,000 worth of revenue. Water and sewer tax stays fairly constant at $386,000, and our business tax pretty much the same at $378,000. On the spend side of things, the council stays in the area of $232,000. The biggest increase there, of course, is the streaming technology that we now have, and that's approximately $14,000. So that accounts for the major increase over last year. General administration and common services, that is essentially all the administrative staff, the property assessments, the phones and things that keep our buildings and everything going on an ongoing basis. Bear with me. Fire protection services, labor services is $824,899. That does include the $146,000 for that capital that we had put in there, but that should be reduced a bit there. So I got $561,000 in the figures I'm using. So that is comparable to this year with a slight increase for the portion of the finance for those lights that we will be replacing, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the capital amount of $146,000. Animal control, slightly less than last year. I don't know if you can see that one there or not, but no. Down slightly, mainly because we will hope we're going to save some overtime versus what we had budgeted last year. So we compare that to actual to find out that we are going to be down a bit. On the municipal enforcement side of things, we'll be down some, I'll say close to 22% overall, but we had pedestrian safety in there for a much higher amount last year at $100,000 versus our 60, so that would help in that case. And the RNC, we had originally thought would cost us $30,000 a year, but it'll be $15,000 now. Our vehicle maintenance will essentially stay around the same. That's always sort of I won't say crapshoot, but it is a crapshoot because we really don't know what's going to happen from year to year. Some of our fleet is aging. Some of our fleet we're looking to replace. Some of our fleet we're going to be reviewing to see if we can actually do rentals now rather than have our equipment sit for 6 months of the year that aren't being used. On the road transport side of things, we're looking at $1.7 million-ish, and that's made up of, obviously, the snow clearing side of things, winter road maintenance, and the wages that our parks, or not our parks, our public works staff have to keep the town going all year long. On the water and wastewater side of things, we have included in there, obviously, the water supply. We have to increase the cost of operations a bit for the chlorine and lime feed, I guess, that we will be using until we get a new treatment plant on stream. Hopefully we'll get some word back in the new year as to how we actually progress with that. The water supply study, obviously, the $40,000 we spoke about earlier, and the leak detection equipment of the $25,000, which I also alluded to earlier. We have to do the sampling program, which was $30,000. Catch basin clean out, which are notorious for filling up, and sort of, you don't really pay attention to those, they can create havoc in terms of floods and washouts in local areas and things of that nature. The lift station panel replacement, we have $35,000 in there, as well as our lift stations age. They certainly have to be replaced, and there are some hefty price tags associated with that, so that'll be $35,000. And these are just highlights of the amount that's in that $1.7 million for the transportation services there. Garbage collection contract is up for renewal as well, and the fees for the dump have gone up as well, so that's reflected in those, and that's probably about 20% there, I guess, $502 versus $577,000. And that essentially is a snapshot of where that stands. The planning figure of $393,000 is less than the 2019 budget for a number of things. If anybody was at the meetings, they realized we took the infrastructure RFP off the board, and we're going to try to use that for gas tax. It was $100,000 that was in there last year. And there was money in there for derelict buildings, which was also offset by $50,000 worth of revenue. So, but on the spend side, those 350s count for the $150,000 difference. You can't see the 2019 budget, I'm sorry for that. But on the tourism marketing, I guess the newest aspect of that is going to be obviously what happens with the community of the priest house, the what do you call it? Someone fill me in now. My name, History House. Thank you. And we have now a full staff for the economic development and marketing side of things and communications. So that is also reflected in those figures. So hopefully we'll get really up to speed on our communications, and when we get Deputy Mayor to hop on the economic development bandwagon and generate some business for the town here that she's so passionate about. On the recreation and administration side, the biggest expenditures there obviously relate to what I alluded to earlier, the community center, and that $678,000 operating figure that is, of course, incremental to where we were in last year. And that essentially brings us through where we were. Programming revenues or programming expenses should be about the same. We haven't really identified a whole list of new initiatives yet, but we certainly will as the community centre starts to mature and we understand how it operates and look at the blank spots and the demands from folks on the outside and try to fill those demands and actually generate a few extra dollars as well, so that we can cut into that operating figure of $678,000. The other side is the financing charges. The financing charges are well below where we expected we would be last year, mainly because we deferred a number of projects, obviously. And these are always a best guess at not so much in the dollar amounts, but the timing of them all. So as we move projects around, like we know that the wastewater treatment will be a couple of years out, whereas we had it planned for 2020. That's more like a 2021 scenario once we, go down the road of the process and the applications and that. So that will essentially smooth out that debt over time. So when you look at the last sheet there, you see a big jump in 2021. I don't think that will necessarily be there, and I'm not overly concerned about that. We'll have $1.6 million this year. In 2021, it says we go to 1.9, but I would expect that'll be less than that, just by the commentary I made before in terms of the timing of how we move things forward. Just on the larger side of things, on the major initiatives, was the History House. The budget was $1 million. Obviously, it was a rare RFP for project manager on the go at the present time. That is a combination of COA dollars, our dollars, and some from the province as well. Climate change adaptation is currently underway, and that is being funded by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I think Jess Pottester is going to be running with that. Jess, right? And we will be looking at all the issues that will affect the town in terms of climate change and adaptation moving forward. North Pond capital application, we had talked about that as well, and that was in the area of $14.9 million in total. So obviously we'll have a portion of that, and the feds and the province will contribute another portion as well. Yet to be determined exactly how that falls out. That's still a year or so out anyway. And the asset management was $100,000. We're going to still need to do that. We will probably, it won't come out of the direct tax dollars, it will come out of probably gas tax dollars. But we do need to identify what we have, where it is, what condition it's in. So we need that whole condition assessment, and we will be working on it fairly readily in the new year. The other thing that's not in the budget really is the application we have put in and approved from the Gas Tax Secretariat. Our $2.1 million over 5 years, we had earmarked 1.1 to repair a number of roads in 2020. So that figure is also a capital project that we will be doing in 2020. So that's $1.1 million worth of road renewal and rehabilitation. And folks, that brings me to the end of the information, I guess. So I'd certainly thank you for your attendance. I think the budget has come a long way from the $2 million that we were really struggling to say, how do we move beyond this? But once we got into the numbers, it came back to essentially a balanced budget where we are. We're going to be tight. There's no doubt about it. There are going to be a lot of learnings coming through the year. I think we're still in great financial shape, and as we get a better handle on some of the operational areas, I think we'll see the benefit come to fruition, and this time next year we'll be able to speak to more normal operations, and we'll see where we go. But anyway, for this year, it's a whole course, and hopefully everybody be pleased with that. So, thank you, folks. Fire away. Questions? Don't make hard ones now, Robbie.
Councillor Pollard. Northbound
Sorry?
capital application. What's that all about?
As for the water treatment facility, we're looking at treating the water coming out of North Pond now. Mm-hmm.
I have a twofold question, Councillor Pollard. Robbie Hicks speaking. There's a frightening gap between the revenue for the Torbay Common and the expenditures for operating it. I'm hoping that there is a plan to reduce the gap between the two. So that the big gap between the revenue and the operating expenses, do you anticipate that that's you're going to be able to look forward to a time that it will pay for itself? That's the first question I have. The second question I have is, when the History House and Museum is up and running, are we going to be in the same situation where the staffing and the other operational expenses are going to exceed the revenues from the History House?
Two great questions. I honestly wish I had the answers to both. I think we realized when the community center was put there that it would not be a break-even scenario. And the revenue side of things is something that we're working our way through, and even Councillor Gallant at his presentation there tonight in the council meeting had recognized that there were some potential holes in terms of the amounts we were charging for usage and that type scenario. Will it ever break even? I don't think so. I think it's going to be sort of like the Jack Burns scenario, maybe, and if we even get close to that, we'll be happy. But I always think that there is going to be a portion of that we're going to finance, or not finance, but obviously take out of tax dollars. I would certainly like to get much closer, and we will. Listen, to say that we need to look at all those figures closely as we move forward. There will be some tweaks if opening times, staff hours, that type scenario, how we operate in the downtimes. It'll take a period of time before we actually realize what we need and when we need it, I think. History House is more of a guess, but that should be closer. It's much smaller dollars operationally, so the impact is certainly not anywhere near what the community center would be.
The staffing, 519,000.
Sorry.
The staffing, 519,000. How much staff is there?
I do have that somewhere. Can you? Sure.
There's one full-time facility supervisor.
Yeah.
There are 2 full-time maintenance, 2 part-time maintenance, 8 part-time program staff, and under recreation administration, there's 3 full-time staff, especially events, youth and seniors, and sports. That's based on a business plan that was developed through working with a consultant, looking at similar recreation facilities across the province. So as Councillor Pollard references, we'll be monitoring that closely over the year to see downtimes, hours of operation. It may be overstaffed, but we won't know until we go through a full year of operations, so it will be monitored very, very closely. Yep.
Tony, thanks for the presentation. I understood it, the pie charts and so on. It was very well done. I'd like to add to talking about the commons, and I say this in the most matter-of-fact positive way, is that the commons is the weakest link, but only because it's new, so there's purposes. But not a but. I would like to see 5-year projection scenarios to see when it would be at a comfortable place, not necessarily a recovery place.
Projections. 1 year out is still, we will have made a best guess.
Recreation activity happens, costing every single event, from staffing to maintenance, every single event, flowers on the table, the food that comes and goes, everything that's involved, itemized, and that's going to help with that projection. And if that's already being done, that's great. But I did want to say that out loud because I've been saying it to different people, but I think the public place is the best place to say it. And that will help with the projections, and that would help with making sure there's not overspending, or that people pull back a little bit when it comes to saying, well, maybe we can't afford those flowers on the table. We might have to pick some from out in the meadow. So, okay.
Yeah, or the conscious realization that there is a benefit in kind to not necessarily cost recovery for certain programs, right? I acknowledge that, and yes, I say recognize that everything doesn't come down to the dollar and cent return on what you're spending for a program. There are some programs that we're going to offer that are going to offer benefit that are going to be from folks' tax dollars. They're not going to be on a recovery basis. But yes, on a conscious effort, we already do track individual events and projects on a cost versus expense perspective, but we certainly will do a much better job in terms of isolating the ones and identifying ones that really have a return, not necessarily monetary return, but the participation rate as well. We won't continue to do programs that have no one show up and incur costs for those. So that in itself will be a saving as well, that type of scenario. So yes, we are pretty well aware and we will be working things like that.
And just to be sure, I thought I implied or said it up front, I really understand recreation programs, community, and like this, the comments, I'm gonna call it that, I know that council members don't want to be too, and that's great, but it really is building community. There's a lot of things to build community here, and sometimes it isn't gonna be that dollar thing, so I understand that, I don't have a problem with that, unless those numbers are the same next year, that are now, you know, this is.
No, I don't either.
Let's hope not higher, hey?
I think the name Torbay Common is lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you should keep it. Just my opinion.
Just as a follow-up to my earlier question about the History House, in the case of the Torbay Common, we're delivering recreational facilities to residents. And so I understand fully that it's not going to be a moneymaker, it's not going to be a revenue neutral, it's fine. So something is being delivered to the residents. In the case of the History House, that's not the same thing, I don't think.
I don't know. It's not comparable probably in terms of one is provide recreation, but it certainly does provide a cultural service and an attraction to the town as well, and it can very well tie into economic development and growth if it works out that it attracts people that we want to do. It also preserves part of our history as well, which is important, and part of our history and heritage. So I think there's that aspect of it. Well, I will say, and I do challenge council as a whole too, and I will challenge council as a whole, is that we have to determine the value of things in relation to the size of the town moving forward as well. And that's my own opinion. That's not all because I'm only one of seven. I'm sure the rest of the council agrees on that too, but we all listen to residents and have different sets of priorities that come from the resident base as well. So there's always that juggle and balance. But I do think, listen, we'll be standing here next year and we'll have a much better idea where we are. But I do think that everything cannot come back to that monetary value, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying that there is a cultural benefit, there is a recreational benefit, there are benefits beyond the dollar. And when we get to this point next year, we'll be able to sit back and evaluate them more readily. And I guess from a project perspective, maybe we got to get to a more citizen engagement to make sure that we are more in line with what the residents want. I'm not saying we're not already. I'm just saying that at least we'll have that immediate feedback to say, yeah, that project makes sense or doesn't make sense. I think Madeline actually mentioned to me one point in time in a conversation after the meeting that for capital projects they actually have the engineers and folks come in and give a presentation so you can actually get resident feedback and actually cover up some of the holes or the things that might be going wrong or type thing. So maybe we'll go down that road as well. And I would say I'm only speaking off the top of my head. I can't speak for the rest of the council, but those things we certainly thought about. Yeah. Sorry.
As the co-chair for finance and the chair of economic development, the History House. And the reason why I'd like to speak to that, because a lot of residents have asked us, why are we moving forward with this project? And to be very clear, we have secured funding from the federal government and provincial government to move this project forward. That money has been secured, it's signed off, that contribution is already done. And from my experience, and I grew up in the town of Bjorn and everybody knows that, but in the town of Bjorn we have an equivalent to the History House, and the Bjorn Heritage Grounds is what they have now. And there's a restaurant there, there's 2 heritage museums, they host a festival. It's been going strong for 30 plus years. And the revenue to the town, the attraction of tourism, now we have something that could draw people to the community. We can preserve our heritage, but also have different things that we can bring in, we can feature there. People can come down, purchase stuff in our stores, visit our shops. There's a lot of economic development benefit to that project, and not just short-term, but long-term as well. So I want to make sure that all residents know that we're looking at this, and for the financial contribution that we're going to make into this project in the short term, the long-term benefit of that project will pay back dividends to this community for years to come, and not just for years, but decades. So it's very important that we share that with residents, and I just want to make sure that people understand the conversations that we're having around that project, because I've been asked that question a fair bit.
Thank you, Tony. It was a great presentation and a great job. And really appreciate the fact that the mill rate is not going up. And I'm sure that wasn't completely easy to accomplish. I do have a few questions. The first one, I may have missed it, but when you talked about the financing charges, where does that leave us in terms of the percentage, what we call the debt ratio right now? Did you, I don't know if you mentioned it then.
I didn't mention it, and I haven't really calculated, but I would think by looking at it, we're somewhere in the area of, we're getting close to 20%, I would think, something along those lines. You multiply 5 times 5, 6, 38, yeah, close on.
Yeah.
19? 22?
22.
22, good, 22, yep.
So that's a little, I guess, something to keep tabs on. I did have a specific question about the water and sewer tax. In the revenue slide, you mentioned that it brings in $386,000. Last year, I thought that the water and sewer tax brought in $600,000. So where are you having? Are you going to have the water and sewer tax this year? I think I'm correct. I think last year was over 600,000 was the revenue from the water and sewer tax. Because the expenditures were like over about 330,000 to maintain the system. Now, it's not broken down here on the expenditure page. You've lumped in with waste management. So I'm curious to know, is that water and sewer tax revenue correct?
I'm just looking at the, sorry, Don, were you saying something? I was just looking at the 2019 budget versus 2020 budget. The comparative was 345 versus 337 on the water and sewer tax.
The revenue, yeah.
So that's the revenue, yes, yeah.
So what is the cost of simply the water and sewer expenditure to maintain that system without the waste management expense? Do you go offhand?
I will, just 1 second. Just bear with me 1 second. The water supply this year will cost us $418,000.
In 2020?
And the sewage will be 107. So you're looking at $525,000.
It seems a lot higher than last year.
Yeah, it probably is. There's some capital items in there, or larger spend items in there. Madeline, you talk about the sampling program. There's $65,000 in there, or $30,000 in there for the wastewater compliance. There's larger replacement of the lift station panel in there for $35,000. There's the water supply and leak detection equipment in there, $25,000. The water supply study was $40,758, and there was some increase in the need for chlorine and the lime feed, and that was in the area of, I'm looking at 40 versus $20,000.
Okay, because I thought last year the revenue was a lot higher than the actual expenditure, but this year seems to be reversed.
I vaguely remember you saying that last year, actually, now that you mention it. We will go back and check those figures again, but yeah, right now, yeah, yeah.
I do have a couple of other questions or comments in regards to the trail. I'm glad to see the 100,000 there. I would have liked to see more, but it's going to be a tough year. I do want to repeat my my suggestion that the trail be hopefully would be nice to focus on the reinstating and reconstructing the trail at Western Island Pond, so that we can improve the hopefully the protection of the buffer there by bringing the public in there. And my other question was, with regards to pedestrian safety, you have $60,000. Will that include speed bumps on the Indian line?
I can't say specifically, Madeline, that they will or they won't. They'll be considered. I don't know where that $60,000 will end up at the end of the day.
It has been talked about for 2 years, I think, if not more, but hopefully.
I hear you.
It is still a problem. When it comes to support for community groups, can you tell me at this point if the town, as the sponsor of the 2020 Trailraiser for the East Coast Trail, has put in their budget and the extra money, or what the budget is going to be for the East Coast Trail in 2020?
You really asked me to get into the weeds now, aren't you? Hey, huh?
Councillor Pollard, I can speak
Sure,
to that.
please, thanks.
So the $5,000 for the annual contribution is included in next year's budget. The request for the Trailblazer, I received an email from President Murphy, I think it was late last week when I was off, and that's will go to the next Admin and Finance Committee meeting. So there are, I guess, ways, if committee wants to make the recommendation to council to support, there are means either through public relations or donations to support that initiative next year.
So it won't necessarily be in time for the budget meeting this Thursday?
No,
No.
no.
And just let me double check, I thought I had another question. I think, no, my last question is, I think the way that the information is provided is fabulous. I think there's more detail perhaps than we're used to, but I think it becomes really, to me, meaningful when we get the income and expenditure sheet where it's all broken down. At what point is this generated? Is the first income and expenditure report generated so that we can actually see the detail? Well, it is, but I mean the new one. Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, Madeline, the new one, you mean?
Well, the income and expenditure report, which provides detail on each of the broad categories,
Mm-hmm.
when is that generated? Just in January? The
No.
first month?
I'm sorry, I'm still, there's a gap between what you're saying and what I'm understanding. I guess really, that is with every council package,
Right.
right? Up to date for the day. There will be
We'll have a new one in 2020.
you'll start clear in 2020, yes,
So
yes.
that's when
There
it
would,
starts, that's when it'll be
Yeah.
available?
yes.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you'll get a final one for 2019 at some point in time as well with the next council package, but yeah.
Well, I guess there's one question though that we didn't discuss, and it usually comes up every meeting, every budget meeting, and that's the expenditures for council. Can you elaborate on that?
They didn't change,
Didn't change?
other than the amount for live streaming.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Pollard, could I just, I guess, add some further clarification to what Madeline is questioning? So
Sure.
from tonight's presentation, if council is in agreement with moving forward with the adoption of the budget, the PowerPoint presentation will be posted online. And also as well too, if council's in agreement, we can put the worksheet comparing the 19 to the 20 online as well too.
Yes, and just, I mean, we're pretty open on that as well anyway, so there's no, the change in council amount you see there went from 207 to 222. The biggest single increase is $13,759 for the live streaming. The other change was really there's no change really. Looking at obviously the CPP portion and EI portion do change. And that is the only other changes that have increased. Remuneration for council stayed the same at 157, 130.
Talking about just the history house, which is kind of something I haven't really been following yet. That's probably the thing. So you were saying that's provincial money, federal money, and then of course in the summer students will be hired through IRS and programs, which is the cost of it as well. Is that right? Yeah.
This, well, I mean, for any project that we do, we try and source money from the federal government, or wherever we can. We also have a private donation from somebody
Right.
in Florida that was a former resident of Torbay that has some money put away for a particular use for the history house. The model that we're looking at to operate that place is more of a social enterprise model. It's going to be, we have right now from Rick Comfort, who did our study,
Business plan.
our feasibility study on the History House Museum, that it would consist of a board of directors. And I think in our report that we have, it outlines that at one point, the revenue that the town will have to put in to support the operations of that facility over time will decrease down to hopefully very minimal amount, because the board will be running it similar to Jack Arena, and then they'll have employees, and it wouldn't be employees of the town that would be working. So it's that type of model.
I think this was a great spot to educate people, because I learned something and I think it sounded very positive. The only other thing I have is, and maybe somebody can help me out with this, I don't know where I heard it, but when the town gets to 22%, and I think it is actually 22, does municipalities and now or the province kind of get a little alert and maybe be a little bit concerned? Is that a number?
That's
Does anybody know?
that's Madeline again doing the magic numbers. She did mention that last time round. Actually, when it gets closer to 30%, and yeah, 30% is usually when they start to, well, they get concerned before, and it's not peaks, and it drops off pretty sharply after that as well. Now, having said that, it all depends on what resident feedback is in terms of what the demands are moving forward. So, financing debt is
Emergency money. I know in our households, we try to do that. So how does that work when you're running a big business or a municipality? And that's my last question. We have reserves. Where is that in the pot?
We do. Don't ask me how much at the present time, because it's sort of a surplus figure that we have to sit down and look at. We have to see what cash we have in the bank, what receivables we have versus what liabilities we have to pay out as well at the end of the day. We do. We're fine. We have enough for rainy days. We have to put money away in reserve too for the whole asset management program as well, which is what we'd have to do. So we'll have to formalize some of that into a identifiable reserve as we move forward into 2020. Not right off the top of my head, I don't, Madeline, but we certainly will once all the budgets are in and things of that nature. I would think, right off the top of my head, I would think we're a little on the high side right now. I would think, to be quite honest with you.
Also, Tony, when you were talking about 22% to 30% and all that sort of thing, and then the municipalities and now the province looks to see how things are operating and running, how people are spending their money. I guess that's where those 5-year projections or whatever that accounting language is of scenarios, how we're going to, stay steady.
The unfortunate thing is I hope no one's looking. The government's really only focusing on 1 year, and myself in another life recently had that conversation with municipal affairs, and trying to tie something to one benchmark is not. It just doesn't make sense for towns that are operationally sound and have a longer term view. Can we do better? Definitely, and we'll do better in terms of providing that 3 to 5 year outlook. Once you get past 5 years, you're pie in the sky, I guess, into it's your larger capital identification amounts that are really going to peg you to what you're doing on an ongoing basis. We only control so much of what we actually spend at the end of the day. Obviously, at 22%, 20 cents of every dollar, 22 cents of every dollar we spend is already accounted for. So we're already working on that 80 cents or 78 cents, whatever it is, out of the dollar, right? And then even outside that, there's fixed costs that you can't change. So when you look at the wiggle room within a $7 or $8 million budget, at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot. You might be working with 60% of those dollars that you can actually say, yeah, I have some choice over. And then it's real choice. Then it's real level of service choice. Do we stop snow clearing? Do we stop repairing roads? Do we shut down buildings? Do we cut out electricity? So if you really sit down and analyze the numbers, it is really not quite as everything flush as you think it is, right? Some things some costs are already, we have no control over. Thank you, folks.
Could I just add one further point to, I guess, what both Paula and Madeline were speaking to? We have a prescribed form, a budget form that we submit to the Department of Municipal Affairs that does the calculation on the debt ratio, and we have posted on that line in prior years, and we will do so in 2020 and continue to do that into the future. The other piece too that residents may not be aware of is that when the budget document is submitted to Municipal Affairs, they do a thorough review, and there is a letter that comes back to indicate whether there's issues with our budget or if everything is approved from their end as well too. So when we receive the letter for 2020, we'll make sure that it's added to the council package so all residents can see Municipal Affairs review as well.
Yeah,
Well-
one sec, Craig. Sorry, just before Craig does the closing, I want to thank Dawn and Jacqueline especially, all the lovely works you see here and all the information. I certainly didn't do it, but so I certainly take them for the contribution. So I can't take any praise or credit for that, but I just want to pass on those. Thanks.
There you go. Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. And I'm sure everybody agreed. Tony did a good job with our presentation. One note that I would like to make, and I think this is my 7th budget that I've been here for, that we've done a lot of capital work in the last number of years with the building, the depot, and renovations to Town Hall, things that absolutely needed to be done. And we've done all that based from the same philosophy we took this year with the budget. We sat down at the beginning, everybody would like to have this, and we worked the same way we did this year. And we haven't put a budget out in this town in the last at least 7 years that I've been here where we increased taxes to make up the revenues that we were short. The mill rate fluctuated up and down based on a percentage of changes to the assessment agency. But when it came to that, we kind of tried to make sure that we stayed in where we were to, which is exactly what we did this year. And I think that for the most part, we've done a good job with that. But that is part of the reason why our debt ratio has risen a little bit. But as you can see on that sheet, the long-term projections out next 4 or 5 years shows that going down into a more reasonable area. But with that, I would say thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you to those who tuned in at home and or who might pick up the video at some point in the future to have a look at it. But with that, thank you for coming. Thanks. And have a Merry Christmas.